don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah. Give me 2 seconds. Why? Why you so okay? Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about moral realism. What was your argument for it again? I know you were debating
Well,
earlier.
it just
Yeah.
goes from like arguing. It just goes from arguing that like if there's some true moral propositions, then they're objective moral facts, right? So you argue against the non-cognitivism and argue against error theory. Now, the two arguments I have
Mhm.
against non-cognitivism and error theory are just inductive cases against both views.
Yeah.
The
When
first
you
one,
say, yeah, I just want to get clear. When you say that, like, there are some true propositions, do you mean as in true as in mind independent, or do you just mean like true as
no,
independent?
I'm just a deflationist about truth. So that which is true is that which it is. So, like for example, the proposition snow is white. That is true if and only if snow is white.
Yeah. So don't you think that if I say it is true that murder is wrong, and by wrong there, I just mean I have X mental state? Don't you agree that like what's
Mm-hmm.
it called?
That's an
Then
objective fact about morality.
wait,
Yeah,
what do you
because
say?
the fact, yeah, that would be an objective fact about morality.
What?
Because even if one of the truth makers there would not be the objects within the proposition, right? You have like different accounts of like truth makers, right? Now, the account that I hold to is a deflationist account of truth making theory, which is just to say that the thing which
Uh huh.
determines the truthiness of a proposition is going to be some coherence with some criteria instead of like there being some object or instead of the fact that like the object's existence or the objects themselves which are referenced by
What?
the proposition are the type of things which makes the proposition
Well,
true.
so you think that like what's it called? If I just say or I make a statement, and the statement is just like, oh yeah, I think murder is good, and by good I just mean it
Yep.
aligns with my preferences. You think that then it is like
Yep.
objectively like under your view, a
That's an
deflationist
objective.
view.
That's yeah. I'm saying this that judgment isn't a. It's like a moral judgment, obviously.
Yeah, obviously
And
it's a
if it
moral
is true,
judgment.
then it's
Yeah,
just objective.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
just objective.
objective. I mean, it would be objective that you have that preference. Is that the sense that you mean it?
No, you're just saying that, well, yes, obviously, it's an objective fact. And if you take it to be the case that having these preferences, these type of preferences about actions, is a moral judgment, and that moral judgment is objectively true, then it would be the case that it's an objective moral
I
fact.
mean, yeah, I mean, you could say it's objectively true that you have this preference and that would be the truth maker. I mean, I get what you mean, someone, but now how do you respond to all of the objections that people regularly give about how, oh, yeah, you can't be a subjectivist because that just means morals are arbitrary and based off of your own
Yeah, they're just
preferences?
going to argue something like there's like that's compatible with the subjectivist, but at the same time, it is not necessarily compatible. In fact, under SCP references the idea that one of the major distinctions or disagreements between the minimal moral realist and the moral subjectivist is
Uh,
based off their concepts of what determines what is true or not. They usually are operating under different truth theories. The subjectivist is usually assuming that the entities of a proposition is the type of thing which determines the proposition being true or makes the
so
proposition
like a
true.
deflationist theory,
The
right?
the minimal hold on the minimal moral realist is a truth maker minimalist like me, for example.
Yeah, so you just believe like also called that the truth maker system. Okay, I got what you mean. I got what you mean. So, what was the inductive case for more realism again?
The inductive case against error theory is just
Or
to
error
say
theory, I
that
should say.
evidence based deliberations.
Uh
Yeah, the
huh.
inductive case is just that evidence based deliberations report subjective facts about the respective domains. So that would mean that moral deliberations report subjective facts about the
I mean,
respective domains. That's
do you
just more
think that
likely.
like I have like specific examples that I had in mind. So like if two people see Messi playing and then they use like
Mm-hmm.
let's say the skills that he does, that's like a completely subjective standard. There's not like objective standard, but like they just use the skills that he's doing and they say, oh yeah, he's a bad player, or this guy, or somebody else says, oh yeah, he is a good player. Don't you think that those type of like the evidence there would be what they observe of his skill? However, there isn't really an objective fact to the matter. I don't think there's enough empirical work to
Well,
say that.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think they would have like some theory of the good, right? And then they use this evidence to like see if the proposition Messi is a bad player does not conform with that theory of the good to determine that he's not a good player,
I mean,
and that relation should be.
don't you think that like what's it called? That if under your view you'd agree that whenever they say, oh yeah, he's a bad player, it's like objectively true that they're a bad player. But if the standard that they're using to decide such a thing is just something completely subjective or mind dependent, then I don't understand how that'd be
Mhm.
mind independent.
Yeah, so we can say the standard for the theory of the good is something which is mental but the proposition about whether he's good or not, that thing being true is going to be something which is not mind dependent, because the coherence between the proposition and the established background criteria, which is the mental attitude or whatever that is, that coherence is going to be something which is not dependent on some psychological state.
I
So the
mean,
psychological state, yeah,
mhm,
let me just
good.
clarify. So like the psychological state or the proposition which is about the psychological state, that being true is not dependent on my psychology towards the proposition about the psychological state. So the proposition would be the fact of the proposition will be something which is mind
I
independent,
mean,
even though the
mhm.
object of the proposition is mind
Yeah, yeah,
dependent.
yeah. So like, but I think my main issue of this is like, yeah, it can what's it called? The truth of that proposition would be dependent on any other mind. However, if even if you're taking the deflationist theory and you're saying that like the truth of the statement is just identical to the statement itself, do you think that if, for example, if I say if snow is or like it is true that snow is white, it's just identical to saying snow is white. If snow is just not actually white, then that claim would obviously be false. So the same way how if like I'm making
Yeah,
a
it's
claim.
gonna be. I don't see. I don't think you're responding. Like we agree that like if snow does not satisfy certain criteria, right, which would make it white, then it would be the case that there's a false
Yeah, don't you think
proposition
that in the
until
same yeah, don't you think that in the same light that if you're making
mm-hmm,
a moral statement and you're saying, oh yeah,
mm-hmm.
X is wrong and X is right, even if like
Yep.
what's it called, independent of any other minds existing, then you'd still have that mental state. But the truth maker there is still going to be dependent on your mental state. Or like the claim about your preferences is saying that oh yeah, or like this is good, it just means it aligns with a
Oh,
specific
you're
mental state.
basically yes. Are you
Yeah.
are you trying to ask me if the claim requires some onto commitment to the preferences or something?
Yeah, it just like it makes you have to be committed
No.
to like them having a specific
No,
mental state
here's
for
like
it
an
to be
obvious
true.
example. So like the proposition Santa Claus lives in the North Pole does not require me to be ontologically committed to Santa Claus, right? It's just to say that like even if I'm not committed to Santa Claus, the object exists in, right? I can say that that proposition, sorry, is sure because of some coherence between that statement and some fictional story, which does not have any real objects.
Yeah,
Or likewise, mathematical facts. The proposition 2 plus 2 equals 4, that is sure irrespective of me being the mathematical Platonist or me believing in numerical properties existing or me
yeah,
believing in whatever existing, right? I don't have to be ontologically committed to the objects of the proposition or the fact of the proposition or the relation of the proposition or the properties were expressed by the proposition for the
yeah.
proposition to be true.
Yeah, I'm not too well read on like my host voice crack, but I'm not too well read on mathematical Platonism, so I'll address the one that I know like enough about. So when you say that like
Some people would say my argument is kind of like a cheap it's like a cheap route out to just like just end the
yeah,
subjectivist, like it's kind of like just like a cheat code against like the anti-realist,
yeah,
but like
I'm gonna
I can
read up
also
more.
I
Good.
can I can be committed to a stronger thesis. Actually, I can be committed to a stronger thesis that it's not about desires.
I mean, I just want to like talk about the first thing first. So when you say like Santa Claus is in the
Okay.
North Pole, even if there isn't like an actual object that
No,
exists
sorry.
within the
Santa
real.
Claus lives at the
Oh
no.
yeah,
Santa
lives in the
Claus
North
lives at
Pole.
the
Yeah,
North
yeah,
Pole.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like
my
even
bad.
if there's no like an actual physical object in the like that like it actually exists in the North Pole, you'd still say that like whenever you say it is true that he lives in the North Pole, that's referencing some physical story. So the truth maker there would be
Some
whether
fictional
or
story.
not yeah, it'd be like oh if you're saying that Santa Claus is some physical object, the truth of that like what's it called? You're referencing some like fictional story. The actual truth maker there would be dependent on within the fictional story or within your like mental state. If you're like making it, you are just imagining it, whether or not he actually is there. So it would still be something like those type of claims. I still feel as if they'd still be reliant on your mental state rather than anything else.
Are you saying that the statement, like the truth of that statement, is dependent on my mental
Yeah,
states?
if I say that like Santa Claus lives in the North Pole, and then the
Yeah.
Santa I'm referring to, obviously Santa doesn't exist, so I'm referring to some like a fictional story. Then the thing that would actually
Yeah.
make my claim about that fictional story true is the fictional story.
No, it's not the fictional story. It's the coherence with the fictional story. Just to be
Oh yeah,
specific,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the fictional
Coherence with
story.
the fictional story. So like if you're making a claim
Yes.
about like the fictional story and then it just doesn't actually happen within the fictional story, then the claim is false. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, but even if I don't accept the fictional story, right, it will still be the case that it's true.
I mean, I don't think like also. I think if you say that, oh yeah, it's true that like also if it's true that Santa lives in X place. If I'm not referring to anything physical or like a fictional story, and in fact I'm referring to reality, I think then the claim will be false anyway. Like,
You don't have to be ontologically committed to the fictional story. In other words, it would need to be mental nor non-mental because it just does not exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. So okay, but do you if you think that like what's it called? Whenever we make statements and we're trying to determine their truth, what we're referring to is just some form of like how to explain this. It's just some form of like a deflation in a sense, so it's just identical to the
Yeah,
statement. This
different claims in different contexts requires different coherence. So like
yeah,
in the statement of like snow is white, that the criteria that has to be met for that statement to be true is a
yes.
coherence between that statement and the state of affairs, right? The actual state of
Yeah,
affairs,
so it
right?
seems as
In
if
the
like
case
what's
of
it
Santa
called?
Claus, in the case wait hold on, in the case of Santa Claus example, that's not the criteria that's in the background of which
I
I'll use to
mean,
determine that proposition
it
to be
seems as
true.
if like what's it called? Whenever people are making moral statements, the judgments that they're making isn't something like as trivial as a deflation in a sense. So, for example, if I'm speaking to you about like what's it called, about morality, and we're having an abortion debate, and you say, "Oh yeah, it's true that abortion is moral," and I say it's true that abortion is immoral, and the truth maker is all like what's it called? We aren't really saying anything like different, like by adding the fact that it is true there. Then I don't understand. What do you think the point of
No,
evidence
no,
is,
no.
or rational
You're not getting
deliberation
this.
would
Like
be?
I'm saying the true theory, the deflationist true theory, just entails that the things which don't determine the proposition being true are things such as the entities or objects of the proposition, the relation between objects within that proposition, the underlying fact of the proposition, as well as the properties expressed by the proposition. It's not to say that there's nothing meaningful which determines the proposition being true. It's just saying all of the above that are being listed are not the things which are the things which determines the
Wait,
proposition being true.
so wait, repeat that. Like, so wait, what was the thing that determines whether or not the proposition is being true?
All the things I've listed is not the things are not the things I should say
So
which
wait,
determine the
not what's it
proposition
called?
being true.
Not whether or not the thing that you're talking about, whether or not like it actually in reality has the property that you're trying to assign to it. You don't think that determines
Yeah,
whether or
so
not it's true?
like the mathematical fact example was one basic example, right? I'm not committed to the mathematical objects existing. I'm not committed to numerical values existing. I'm not committed to things such as
Mm-hmm.
the relation, like some specific like abstract relation through which they're connected to each other conceptually existing. I'm not committed to any of these specific ideas, ontologically speaking, but it is still true, irrespective of that.
I mean,
That's not to say
why would
that's not to
one?
say, hold on. That's not to wait. Hold on.
God,
That's not to say that the proposition being sure right there is going to be something which is when I say this sure, I'm just making like some trivial statement. No, it's just to say that those things I listed are not the type of things which are the truth maker.
I mean, if the thing that you list, or like if one of the things that is a truth maker of the thing isn't its correspondence to reality, then why do you think
None
we
of those
have?
are truth makers, but they're still a meaningful truth maker.
Wait, what'd you say?
None of those I've listed are truth makers, but there still is a meaningful truth maker.
Yeah, okay, I get what you mean. But like, whenever like I don't understand, do you not think that like if what's it called? Whenever we're saying X is true and X
Yo.
is false, if it's just simply just like something completely trivial and it's just like dependent on how to explain this, it's just dependent on whether or not I'm actually making the statement. So if I say X is white, that's like all completely dependent on whether or not like I make the statement or not. Do you not think
No, no,
that?
no, no, no. It's not. No, no, no. Hold on. It's not saying just so long as you make the statement, it is true, right? It is saying if I say snow, like let me give like an example. If I say that it is the case that Platonism is true or Platonic objects exist, right? Yeah, if Platonic that proposition is true if and only if Platonic objects exist, right? Now, it is not the case that merely stating the proposition under the deflationist view is the type of thing which makes the proposition true. That would make every proposition true, right? So that's
Yeah,
not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's the type of the type of conditions or criteria that the proposition has to be true. So for
yeah,
it to be the case, if I'm saying that Platonic objects exist or Platonism is true, for that proposition to be true,
uh huh.
there has to be a fulfillment of the background criteria I have when I'm making that proposition. That criteria being me
Mm-hmm.
trying to accurately describe the state of affairs, right?
Yeah, wait,
Now,
okay.
if,
Oh, okay. I get you. I guess
if
so. If what's it called?
yeah, hold on. Let me. I would like to finish real quickly.
I just want. I would just want to
Like
see if I'm getting it, so that like
yeah,
you don't. Yeah.
I would really prefer if if you allow me to finish
Yeah. Good.
because you perhaps would understand it even better. So if platonic objects does not satisfy this criteria of actually being a part of the worldly state of affairs, then it would not be the case that it is true. However, as I've said before, given the proposition of what is being talked about, right,
Yeah.
the criteria will be different. So, like in the Santa Claus example, I'm not trying to relay a fact about the external world, so it doesn't have to cohere with the external world for it to be true. In that case, it just has to cohere with some fictional lore story because all I'm talking about there is a fictional lore story.
I mean, that sounds a lot like how to explain it. That just sounds a lot like correspondence theory. Then, if like what's it called?
No, there's a difference.
I mean, I
Correspondence
know what you
theory
mean, but
depends
I'm
on the
saying the description you just gave because it's like if you say, "Oh, well," whenever I say Santa Claus is real, and the thing that would make it true is just some correspondence with some fictional story. That it sounds like a correspondence theory. But
No,
the main
so
thing,
correspondence theory depends on the theory of the world, right? So, like, a correspondence theorist will say that, like, that which
yeah.
is true is that which corresponds to the external reality. Under my view, that's not true because clearly, in my case, in the Santa Claus example, that is true, but there's no external fact, there's no external world fact being represented there.
I mean, oh, so okay, I get what you mean now. So it's like depending on the view on the wall. I get what you mean, but the main thing that I'm more interested in talking about is like, do you think whenever you, I'm pretty sure you made an argument, something like evidence based deliberations seem to be like what's it called? They seem to
Evidence-based deliberations report objective
yeah,
facts about the
report
given
objective
domain.
facts. That was the word
Yeah.
that was at the tip of my tongue. So do you have like, is there any empirical work for this or like, is it just something you came?
Yeah, there's several empirical works. Like I can just list the examples. Mathematical deliberations report subjective facts, and they are not the type of things. Are they are the type of things which are evidence based? Deliberations in the field of biology, in the field of physics, in the field of chemistry, does the same. Deliberations about economics does the same, and these are
Yeah, and what do you mean
motivated
when
by
you say
objective
evidence
facts like
based
GDP
deliberations?
growth.
Because I have a different meaning whenever I say it. What do you mean when you say?
Evidence-based
Mhm.
deliberations by that I just mean the type of deliberations or you could say a decision-making process which which are motivated by evidence. So we come to the conclusions in these deliberative processes based off
What? Wait.
evidence.
So
That's
you
what I mean
think
by
that like
evidence.
what's it called? Okay, I get what you mean now. So, do you think that there are any examples of us being motivated to make decisions via the evidence that do not report like objective facts?
That's fine. That doesn't attack the argument. It's saying that like when I'm
No,
talking about
I
it
just want to
reporting
know what
objective
the
facts,
examples of those would be.
all I mean there is just to simply say that whatever that evidence-based deliberation is about, so long as it is evidence-based and it is reporting or rather it is attempting to report some facts about the world, there is a fact of the matter
No, no,
about
no.
the
I just want to know,
proposition.
like, what's it called? Whenever you say that there are certain evidence-based deliberations that do not report objective facts, I want to know, like, what's it called specifically? What would be an example of that?
Sure. So like, if you look at like a special relativity theory, for example, or relativity theory as a whole, and how it talks about how gravity is going to be the type of thing which impacts space time itself or just time, which is called gravitational time dilation. The evidence for that is going to be based off like clocks in GPS satellites, for example, right? In outer space being 38 like microseconds ahead of clocks on Earth, which is just going to be an expected empirical consequence of that theory.
Yeah,
Now, that is evidence for the theory being true, and that's an objective fact, and that evidence leads to an objective fact about that theory.
yeah, but like, what's it called? You said there were examples of like us having object evidence-based deliberation and then not being an objective fact. So I just wanted to know, like, what the examples of those would be.
I just
Oh,
gave
I
you
thought
one
you said
example.
that there was an objective fact. So I
We
was
deliberate.
confused.
Hold on, we deliberate about the nature of time, right? So like, is time something which is relative, or is it something which is a universal constant, right? We deliberate about that. That's one example.
I mean,
Now,
yeah.
there's evidence which motivates XYZ deliberation, like for example, it being relative, and then just gave you the example, right?
Yeah, so what's it called? Do you not think that if there's like evidence, how to explain this? Do you not think that if the for induction you gave just wouldn't be a large enough like sample size? Because just giving me four examples, especially with the variety that we have in human speech and the
Mm-hmm.
amount of arguments that go on a day to day basis, do you not think that
Mm-hmm.
if you just try to make such a broad claim and say most of the claims that we make have an objective fact about the matter, that would need some statistical evidence rather than some form of anecdote?
No, that's not really true. The sample size can be small. It doesn't matter. Even if it's like just three, it is still going to be good evidence because my kind of evidence is just to say that something is evidence for a given proposition or hypothesis being true if that proposition or set of propositions or facts are the type of thing which makes that proposition more likely than its negation, right? So ceteris paribus, it will be more likely than its negation
Do
based
you
off the sample size. It raises the probability.
I
So
mean, do
that
you
would be a
not think that
special
just seems
condition
a
for the
little bit like a hasty generalization, trying to say that these all or like these things you're trying to make a certain type of conclusion off of just simply a small sample size? Because of course, like not only due to the fact that because we know for certain that loads of people use like words and like they try and argue in completely like different ways. It's like our language is very unique, especially I know like multiple other instances. So the Messi and Ronaldo example was like a perfect one, where it's like what's it called? Obviously, I think we would align with most people's intuitions to say that there's not a mind independent. It's not mind independently true that there is like, or there isn't some mind independent standard that a such player meets that makes them the objectively best player. Yet we still seem to argue and like are motivated to pick certain people, even regardless of this even regardless of this like fact. If you get what I mean. So we still seem to be like making deliberations. Or like another example would be I try and pick one piece of poker, or I try and pick like two doors. I pick one over the other, and the evidence is just that the door looks nicer to me. However, like there isn't an objective fact about the matter as to whether or not this door actually looks the best, right? It's just some like subjective thing or some personal preference that I have.
Yeah, so like yeah, I mean this the whole idea of sample size stuff is just going to be relevant, as I've said to you before, because of my kind of evidence. Like here's like an example, really. Like let's say like for example, we can like the Black Ravens example. For example, if we're trying to like say like with 100 ravens, like or 110 ravens or 110 ravens, I should say, in the sample size. And like basically there are like several more ravens that exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the point is simply that if I observe 100 black ravens and 10 white ravens, and then I'm trying to predict the probability of the next raven I observe, which I don't know the color of to be black, in respective of it being white, you can like use like Bayesian theorem, right? And then after you use Bayesian theorems, like calculate the probability. You run like some binomial distribution, which basically what that does is simply it covers up for the how small the sample size actually is. So even if by itself it would be the case that given that data, the probability of like the black raven in comparison to the white raven to be something like 0.091 or something, which is a really small probability. We can use the binomial probability distribution to actually calculate the probability of that or of the next raven being black, irrespective of how minuscule, I should say, the sample size actually is.
Yeah, I'm not too well informed on like what's it called on like theories of probability. So I'll just say this specifically. Like if I you've given me like three examples of it being of like it being this set way or like or it having an objective factor that matter. Do you not think that if like I could give you multiple other examples of like us having evidence based deliberations, yet there not being an actual set factor that matter, which seems to align with our intuitions, then it would be like then it would just be again like basis on the contrary or
I don't
like
see why it
basis
would
on
not
the
allow for intuitions.
I
And
mean
besides, I count intuitions to be good evidence under the
yeah
circumstance where the intuitions are strong intuitions. So it is widely held by people. If it is
yeah
not widely held, they don't.
do you think that like most people would agree or like most people have intuitions that there is an objectively best type of music?
I don't know about that. I
I
don't think.
mean initially like upon just hearing the statement it just seems like absurd that like, people most people won't agree and there isn't like a strong consensus that this music is
I
like the
think
best.
there might be some people believes this, but I don't think like most people believe that. And by objective, we're talking about objective in the philosophical sense, which
Yeah,
people don't
like
really think about.
most people
But
most
yeah,
I don't,
you have to consider when someone says something is objectively X. Majority of laymen aren't thinking about things in the metaphilosophical sense that we're thinking
yeah
about things,
obviously
right?
but like if
So like,
mhm.
yeah, we have to place that into consideration. Number one, and number two, we have to place into consideration the dubious nature of the claim you're making and the lack of empirical
Do
data
you not?
supports
Yeah,
it
yeah,
here.
yeah. Do you not think that like what's it called? If well, I mean, most people seem to just interpret like objectives to just mean in line with the facts, right? And obviously, what's it called? Whenever we set standards for music, right? Is it as if that one there's a factual basis in this? I think if you ask most people, and this isn't like something that I think is too important, like relevant, but like if you ask most people, is there an actual set fact or objective fact about this is the way you actually rank music? or this is the way you decide which one is better. Clearly, right, at least like clearly it is like most people would agree that we don't have this type of intuitions that this is a fact. Or you can use this like so same sort of thing with like football. You can say most people they don't have a wide consensus on which player is the best, right? And the reason being is because people tend to value different things. So it seems as if like people don't agree generally that there's this one set standard as to how everyone values stuff that
That's
is
cool.
set
I don't think
personally.
there's one set standard in a lot of stuff which are in fact objective field.
No, when I say one set standard, I mean like, do you not think that if there was an objective metric to like objective metric towards something, towards how to do this thing, then people would have discovered it already? Like, if there was an
No,
objective metric.
I don't. Well, hold on. By objective metric, you're just talking about like a non-opinionated metric,
Yeah,
right?
do you not think that if people had like a mind independent metric to determine which player was like the best?
I don't think it is expected under the hypothesis that there's a mind independent metric that people would observe it. So, like for example, there's
Mm-hmm.
several things out there in the universe which are mind independent, which we do not observe. Like for example, electrons. Technically speaking, we don't observe electrons, but we observe effects of the electrons. Because they're just that small, or dark matter. We don't observe dark matter, but we hypothesize its existence, and several other quantum phenomena which we don't directly observe, are
Yeah,
rather
but upon
things. There's several
initial.
things. Yeah. So in other words, just to be clear, there are several things that are undiscovered that we do not discover, which are objective.
Yeah, yeah,
So I don't
obviously,
see how
obviously,
that
like
would.
that's obvious. But like the thing I was mainly referencing is that they are set. For example, whenever I'm trying to determine which object is bigger than another, right? Like there are certain
Yep.
metrics that are going on within my head that like are quite literally. If we do not have these metrics, then we'd all just be massively mistaken about like the size of things. So, for example, if I put this thing on a scale, and this scale and this scale actually seems to report a number X, and then what's it called? I put another object on the scale and it reports a completely different number, right? You'd say that upon initial observation, they like also the standard would be whether on like the amount of numbers it has on the scale. These type of metrics are like ways we can actually determine a factual which one is heavier than the other. So it seems as if we are able to discover like factual standards about how we measure things. However, this same type of thing doesn't seem to appear in terms of like football, in terms of all of these other stuff. If you get what I
It
don't
could
know.
just mean the
Hmm?
epistemology. It could just be the epistemology of numerical measurement is more clear cut than the epistemology of other measurements.
Wait, what did you
Doesn't mean
say? There
that
was a car in your
well,
background. Background.
it doesn't lend credence. Yeah, so like just because like like the epistemology of like certain like evaluations in mathematics or measurement is less convoluted or less controversial than other epistemic assessments of other facts, does not lend credence to the idea that those other facts, which are more convoluted, are more likely to be mind dependent.
I mean, I don't understand. Like, what would be the real reason as to why, like, for example, facts about which player is a better footballer would be more convoluted than how we determine facts about which like object is heavier? I don't understand.
Because there's a widely universally agreed upon standard for like for example mathematical deliberations or measuring an
Yeah.
object's weight size, but there's no universal standard for the
Would you
contrary.
not say that we seem to observe like would you not say we seem to observe like a mind independent or a seemingly I get how to yeah, a mind independent standard for things that are objective to determine whether or not things are objective? Do you not like agree that we seem to have set standards for this that we use to determine it? And these standards seem to not generally just not be opinion
If
based.
that is the case, then that works against your view because you're trying to argue that it is more like these standards, in these other cases, are mind dependent, and it
No,
is
no, no.
more
I'm
likely
trying to say that
that these
like
facts be mind.
if for the case of things that we know for certain our mind they are like independent, we seem to have these set standards,
Okay.
right, that everyone agrees upon to determine whether or not they exist. But in the case of
Yep.
morality or which player is the better footballer, or even like which ice cream tastes the best, it seems as if these same type of standards are not actually present, which would count against like a more realist view.
How would they count against moral realism?
I mean, because if like or no,
You're
more.
just talking about moral divergence, like
Oh
for
yeah,
that moral
yeah, yeah.
convergence.
Something along those lines.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah. So like they issue their
yeah,
argument is simply that there's strong cases for moral convergence. So like, we agree with maleficence rules like across like every culture, majority of cultures agree that like it is wrong to harm someone. That's just like one example. We generally agree that it is wrong to kill like an innocent kid for no reason. So like and even there like Berlin numeracy test, for example, and other like I guess polls and research studies, which confirms that a wide, like a vast majority of Americans and people have like utilitarian intuitions, right? So we can appeal to those convergences in ethics and say that, okay, if you think that convergence is going to be like a necessary condition for there to be objective moral facts, then here are these cases which has moral convergence or
Yeah.
convergence about the ethical fact, ethical data, and under your view, that would be something which is strong evidence for moral realism.
I mean, one, I don't really too much agree with moral
And also
convergence.
this divergent stuff happens in like quantum mechanics. So like you have like multiple different
Hmm.
theories which explains the universe in quantum mechanics. You have string theory, for example, you have causal dynamical triangulation theory, and much more theories, much more like other quantum gravity theories, which actually attempts to explain the data or explain the phenomena of the universe. And you could say that yes,
Yeah.
there's a divergence in the community as it pertains to
Yeah,
like
but don't you?
which theory
Hmm.
is actually true. But under your views, presumably, if there's divergence, then there's evidence for it being subjective. But then that would mean that there's no objective factor of the
I'm.
fundamental nature of the
Yeah.
universe, which is just not the case.
Yeah, so like one, it seems as if even in like the scientific field, I don't know too much about the quantum field, but in, like at least from what I've generally observed, it seems as if compared to moral talk, it seems as if there's like way more convergence, for example, right? So again, even if most people would
Is that
disagree,
like an empirical claim?
like I mean, don't you think that
Because
like
they're like yeah, because there are several moral okay, think of any moral proposition which is about killing someone,
I
right?
mean, I mean,
And
I
think of
think
any
yeah, I
scientific.
think that most of the time, whenever people are
Oh, wait,
making these type of
hold on. Just to be
propositions,
clear,
they
like,
aren't talking
just
about
think about
some
hold on.
like
Just think about
objective
those
facts.
propositions. Hold on. Just real quickly, just a moment. Think
Mm-hmm.
about those propositions which are about killing someone, or which is about something which is obviously immoral, right? And just think about the scientific propositions, which is universally agreed upon.
I
And
mean,
then
I just
now,
have subjectivist intuitions.
and then now you'd have the impossible burden of numerically quantifying the amount of scientific propositions which are universally agreed upon in contrast or in comparison
Yeah, I
with the
think
more
people.
propositions which are universally agreed upon to make the claim that there are
Mhm.
more convergences in the field of
Okay,
science in
it's.
comparison to
I'm
moral
going
evidence.
to explain it like this. It's like I think people tend to like gravitate towards having similar preferences. So whenever they say X is wrong, they're just expressing like all similar preferences. But I
That
don't
begs the
think.
question against the
Wait,
moral
yeah,
realism.
yeah, yeah. I know. I'm just saying like what's it called? And I just have subjectivist intuition. So whenever you
There's
say that people,
neurophysiological evidence which shows against this.
whenever like you say, oh yeah, people tend to agree that X is wrong or X is right. You sure I can say that they agree on that. However, I don't think that's actual good evidence for like a more realist view, especially when it could also just be saying that oh yeah, they're all expressing similar preferences. Because of course, if like preferences are the type of things where they're going to be built off of like an evolutionary back like or they're going to be highly influenced by your evolution. Where if like there are certain traits or certain preferences that you may
Their
have,
field
which
predictions under evolution.
wait,
So like
can I
here,
can
here are
let
the
wait,
field
wait, wait
predictions
really
of
quickly,
evolutionary theory for that.
wait, really quickly. Like I just want to like get
Sure.
this out. So what's it called? So yeah, if you from an evolutionary standpoint, that's if we have preferences that seems to, for example, make the survival of our species less likely, then it seems as if like the people who have these preferences will like lose out in the process of natural selection for one. And then two,
No,
we seem to also have like strong you can say we can have convergence. I mean convergence kind of like begs the question for a realist, but we seem to have people more
no, it
agreeing
doesn't. You agree
on
with there
like
being convergence.
I mean if you say convergence like what's
Most
it
people
called.
agree. Most people agree that killing
Mhm.
people is wrong, and there are studies for this,
Yeah,
right?
no,
But
no, 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 no. That's not what I mean. I say when in the context you're talking about, whenever you say convergence
that's
or whenever
convergence.
you say convergence, it seems as if you're implying that they're converging to some objective fact of the matter, which I wouldn't grant. But if you don't, yeah, 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 yeah. If you don't mean it in that sense,
Don't try to skip the goalposts. You asked me. You asked
mhm,
me. Don't be dishonest. You asked me to show evidence or just show signs of there being moral convergence. And by moral convergence, what you meant is just
mhm.
simply there being a moral judgment which is universally agreed upon to be
Oh no,
true.
no, okay,
Which
yeah.
people,
I thought whenever
yes,
you were talking
yeah.
about it, yeah, yeah, I thought whenever you were saying in this context, you meant that they were convergent. But it's fine.
No,
Look,
I was.
oh yeah, yeah, but it's fine. The thing that I mainly want, like, or the thing I mainly want, like, hit the nail on the head on, is quite literally just the fact that we seem to also observe convergence upon things that we know for certain aren't like an actual fact of the matter. So look at, for example, there I'm pretty sure there should be pollings on like football teams. Whenever they try and determine which team does everyone think is the best in football, you see a variety of people are converging towards teams like Real Madrid or
You're making up a bunch of points. I
I
wanted
mean,
to respond to the evolution point real quickly.
yeah, sure, 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 but
Before we get onto that, because I still have to go anyways. The for the evolution point, the evolutionary data you're appealing to justify moral anti-realism is underdetermined. So like that same data can be used to support moral realism because one could argue that there's certain evolutionary theories which predicts the data, or rather, it is expected under those theories that more realism would be true. And evolution, all it does is just simply it enhances our cognitive capability to discover the objective moral facts instead of the type of things which constructs the moral facts in the sense where it constructs our intuitions, which is going to be a mental state, which in return construct some other set of facts which you consider to be moral facts. So the evolution theory can be used to actually argue that instead of it being the thing which constructs certain preferences, which gives rise to the
Mm-hmm.
certain like moral judgments or moral intuitions or moral beliefs, it is the type of thing which enhances our cognitive capability to discover the objective moral facts of the world. That's number one. Number two, I mean, as it pertains to the convergence stuff, as I've said and as I've clarified, and not begging the question so far as I'm saying that they're convergent, like one idea, one objective fact or something. All I'm saying there is simply that you'd have like an impossible burden when you're making the claim of like there being more convergence in the field of science to actually demonstrate that through like some numerical data or some empirical data. That's just going to be like a really hard claim to actually prove there. That's number one.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, just let me not waste your time like a lot more, but so you can leave soon. But
oh yeah, I forgot one more thing. Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still here?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh yeah, the preferences thing. Oh yeah, so there are two things. Number one, there's evidence. There's neurophysiological evidence against the idea that moral judgments and deliberations come from preferences. There are like some studies for. One of these are like MEG studies. So
Wait, you're
like there's one
lagging.
in
You're cutting out.
2012.
You're cutting out. I'm not here. You're
I'm
like
still
breaking
bugging.
up in your words. Yeah. Can you repeat it real quick?
What you said about my words?
No, you said like you were breaking up whenever you were like talking.
Oh, okay, okay. So I was saying that like in 2012 there are like some studies that shows that like moral judgments were associated with increased activity in the dorsolateral PFC, the prefrontal cortex, which is an area involved in cognitive control and decision making rather than emotional processing. And there's some psychophysiological evidence which shows that skin conductance response and like heart rate measures have found that moral judgments can be made without significant emotional arousal. And these are some studies in like 1993 by Weasley, and there's another one in 2005. I don't have the links on me right now, but I do in fact can send you the links later. And there are like at least 8 more studies I have of there being more deliberations and judgment processes which occur independently of there being any emotional activation in the neurophysiological domain, right?
Yeah.
Which is just going to be an expected prediction under the more realist view. So this question about number one as to whether these things even arise from preferences give the neurophysiological data. That's number one. Number two, we can grant that these things are just preferences related, and it would still be the case given the deflationist truth theory that these are still stands independent moral facts. And number three, evolutionary theories as failed predictions. There are things we intuit to be moral and immoral respectively, which has no sort of survival contribution. Like for example, let's give one example, like the idea that we should not lie, like it's just this, like you shouldn't be dishonest or you should not like betray someone. Like betraying someone in like a normal case of like, for example, if your friend is like, let's say, getting beaten up in an alley, or your friend is getting bullied verbally in an somewhere, and you decide to take the his opponent's side or something, right? That's you kind of like betraying your friend, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people generally look at that scenario and be like, well, that's immoral. That's just a bad thing to do. That's just really dishonest right there. But that immoral intuition has nothing to do with like our survivability, right? Insofar as whether or not you betray the person doesn't seem to be something which is conducive to our survival capabilities. So that's just a field prediction under the evolutionary account of ethics, because the evolutionary account of meta ethics would predict and expect that all the meta ethical intuitions we have and the correct moral judgments we have are going to be the type of things which are conducive to our survivability. But that's not the case given the data that we look toward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the first thing that you like, what's it called? The first thing that you talk about is like evolution could just be something that actually enhances our ability to discover the moral facts. I mean, I just disagree with that. Instead, because it seems as if no,
You
like
disagree with it being possible?
no, 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 no. I say like no, it point being possible, just like actual. So I don't think evolution actually like enhances our ability to discover moral facts. Quite simply, I
Well, I'm
just
not
think.
saying it actually does, but I'm saying that that is going to be reason to underdetermine your
Oh, yeah,
evidence.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
like, the thing you're appealing to can be explained away by an opposing theory, so
yeah,
it will
but
not be
yeah,
good
yeah, yeah,
evidence
oh,
for
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah,
theory.
okay. I just think that, like, what's it called? If you explained it under a more realist hypothesis, it just seems to lose out on parsimony because, again, you said you had empirical work about how, like, more judgments are like linked on preferences. So I won't talk about this too much until I see the empirical work. But quite literally, if it's just like if it can be explained
Oh,
under
that's not true about the parsimony point, by the way.
well,
What
yeah,
kind of
yeah. I just
parsimony are you going on?
let me just flesh out the point first. So, like, for example, if it could be
Hmm.
explained under like a subjectivist view that all of these moral judgments we make are just expressions of preferences, and then under a more realist view, because I hope you can agree that most of the moral judgments we have, we also seem to prefer to do and act upon these moral judgments. So they are very closely linked to each other. So
Hmm.
not only would you have to posit that we're evolving to have these moral facts, to like discover these moral facts, but we're also evolving to prefer them as well. And it seems as if it can just be explained by just preference alone, then that would win out on parsimony for one, and then two, you like this was the point that I really had much disagreement on, which is like more judgments having no bearing on our survival. Particularly, I don't agree with that. So like that per se, the example you gave was like betrayal. Now I think if I betray Mercury or Clicksu, and it's like what's it called? And I betray them and I go and side with their bully. Obviously, that's like an impeachment on trust. And trust is like one of the most important things for any type of social animal. So if now people have this like preordained like no acknowledge of you that oh this person will betray you if like the situation gets a little bit tough, then people are less likely to trust you, they're less likely to want to hang around you, etc. So it seems as if these type of things have like a large bearing onto our ability to behave as social animals, which is the entire reason why humanity has survived and evolved so far. But yeah.
Yeah, so like I don't know what kind of parsimony going under. If it is ontic parsimony, then not just asking for an argument for ontological parsimony is going to be probability raising. If it is going to be parsimony based on the description length of a theory, then that's just not the case. Just like how you just derived like two propositions on the moral realist view to explain away the evolutionary data, I can do the same for the moral anti-realist. You'd have to explain away why it would be the case we have these preferences towards the moral facts, and why it is the case given the evidence available that the evolution
Wait,
the natural
can you
phenomenon of
repeat those
evolution.
things? Can you repeat that again? So why would be what?
Yeah, I'm saying that like yeah, the moral anti-realist also has propositions they'd have to prove or explain away. Like for example, they'd have to explain why we have these preferences. For one, I don't even know if it is even grants. Like okay, let's just grant that we have these preferences, right? I don't see like you guys would have to explain like why you have these preferences as well as the underlying expenditure mechanism behind that thing which gives rise to these preferences, which you take to be mental or mind dependent. So likewise, just like the moral reality of two propositions, or you could say hypotheses or bits of information, you'd have to explain away for your belief to be true.
Yeah.
By parsimony, I'm not sure if you're referring to ontological parsimony, but if you're referring to ontological parsimony, then I have no reason to believe that that is the type of
We
thing
can go
which
with
is
the
probability
descriptive
raising.
length one if you want. We can go with the descriptive length one that you spoke about.
Yeah, so like under the descriptive length one, I don't see any reason as to why it would have a longer description length. And I've
Yeah.
just explained why it would not have a longer description length, because just like how you laid out two propositions, which you think the moral realist would have to explain.
Yeah. The
And by the way,
anti-realist
that's
also
not
has
even.
to.
And by the way, that's not even an attack in my view because I don't hold to an evolutionary kind of meta ethics. So that's number one. And number two, even if I did, I just gave you two propositions which the moral anti-realist would have to be committed to, which they'd have to explain away. So it's the same amount of propositions, just to be
Yeah, I
clear on that.
mean,
So it is
I
not the
think that
case.
like if
Hold on,
the yeah, God.
Yeah, so it is not the case that given your explanation or description, one has a longer description length. It's just more like you missed out either deliberately or unintentionally missed out another bit of information that the moral anti-realist would have to explain away. Let's see, the evolutionary thing. Yeah, you pointed out that betrayal has some correlation to trust, and trust has some correlation to survivability. And not to point out that the betrayal in that specific case has any strong correlation to survivability, which it does not. And evolutionary quantum ethics would presume, or rather expect, that all the moral judgments that are true, or all the moral intuitions we have, or whatever moral data we're appealing to, or we're trying to explain away, or we're trying to actually analyze in the case scenario, that type of content is going to be the type of thing which has a strong correlation with survivability. But we clearly see that that is not the case in the case that I've given, right? Whereas we know that evolution theory, given the content of evolution in science, right, or more specifically in biology, evolutionary biology, we know for a fact that the data in evolutionary biology suggests that evolution shares a very strong correlation with survivability. In fact, that's one of the core elements of evolutionary theory. Now, if you understand that specifically, right, then presumably, if moral facts or judgments were to be the type of things which are derivative of this evolution of biological data,
Hmm.
then these things, in all cases, right, should have a strong correlation with survivability. But we observe that this is not the case, given the fact that in the case I've given, we don't have any sort of intuition that our survivability is going to be something which is compromised if I was to take my friends or take my and the enemy of my friend's side in that case,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it's just going to be a failed prediction under that view. Pointing out that betrayal is correlated to trust, which is correlated to evolution, is not pointing out that betrayal shares a strong correlation with evolution in that specific case of highlighted, which would be the expected prediction under the evolutionary theory of metaethics. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So one, I just want to say like what's it called? Whenever you say talk about the immediate drop in the immediate drop in survivability, I think humans have evolved to actually be able to consider things in the longer term rather than just immediate reactive animals. So for example, we've evolved to have reason, we've evolved to actually be able to look at the future and see, oh well, if this thing negatively affects me in the future, then I probably shouldn't do this thing because like obviously it will decrease your survivability in the future. So if we
Wait,
are
wait, this would
seeing
seal it. Wait, sorry to cut you off. This would seal it. Wait, this just a question. This would seal it. So I gotta go soon. Do you agree that like evolution,
uh-huh.
without evolution, we would not exist? We
Without
human beings,
evolution, we humans wouldn't exist. Yeah, but
the current human
I
beings would not
won't
exist.
respond to all of the thing first because I know like I want to see how you'd respond to like
Do you have
most of
them
them.
written down or something?
Oh yeah, yeah, I have them written down. I have them written down.
Okay, okay, then that's good. I'm just gonna ask you this question, right? If you grant, which most likely you do,
Uh
that
huh.
the current human beings, as we know it, are derivative of the evolutionary process that you're talking about, then all of the things we discover via our reasoning, which are objective facts, technically speaking, are an inherent byproduct or an indirect byproduct of us being able to be cognitively efficient and powerful enough to discover these facts, which, per your own agreement, is the type of thing which is caused by our evolutionary process back then.
I mean, I think that whenever you say, for example, like we reason X or we reason Y, and you try and say that would be like an objective moral fact, I think that type of
No, I'm
statement
not
would.
saying the reason is objective moral fact. I'm
Hmm?
saying
What?
we reason towards these objective moral facts.
Yeah, you see, think we reason towards objective warfare. I mean, I think, yeah, I do just disagree that we've evolved to actually reason towards these things in the first place. But the main part of the objection that I want to, or the main part of what you said that I want to talk about is when you said that like there's no immediate drop in survivability. I can agree with that. However, we've evolved to be rational animals. We've evolved to actually be able to not
Okay, I'm
just
gonna.
consider
Okay,
the
so
short
like,
term.
well,
So,
okay, look, hold on,
mhm.
hold on. When I leave the VC, that means that my phone died. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
continue.
yeah. So, but like we've evolved to actually just not consider things in the short term. So, whenever we make a decision, we're also considering long term effects as well. So, even if we say, oh yeah, betraying your friend would be wrong, that means I don't prefer it. The reason why it would actually drop in your survivability is because we're also considering the long term and not just immediate effects. So, we've evolved that way for one. And then two, you said that what's it called? An anti-realist would have to explain why we have these preferences. The way they just explain is that we seem to prefer, again, most people, most rational people seem to prefer things that boost their survivability or boost their quality of life. So an anti-realist to just explain it that way, that we've evolved to like be in situations that improve our quality of life. And the second explanation will be why we have these preferences. And again, that's just accounted for under the thing I just said. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. So, like, by the way, what's the empirical data for the idea that given the content or data of evolution, we evolve to consider only short-term benefits and not long-term
No,
benefits?
no, no.
That
I
would need
said
like some
we've
scientific
evolved. We've
evidence.
evolved to consider both. So we've evolved to consider both short and long term benefits. Unless you
Okay,
disagree
cool.
with that.
Like,
Do you
so
think we're like
yeah, so
remedially
I don't,
reactive?
no, I don't disagree with that. It's just that you painted it to be the case that you only consider the short-term
No, no,
benefits.
no. Oh, no, no, no.
But with that being
I
said,
was trying to say that like regular non-rational animals, they seem to be a bit more reactive and consider short-term effects more. However, like for example, if you try and inject your dog is going to try and stop you from injecting it, even if the injection would benefit in the long term, right? But humans aren't like that. Humans will like take this type of short, like oh, will take this type of like pain for longer term benefits. If you get what I mean. Maybe his phone died.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Shinra.
Hello. I'm engaging in very educating talk with Apollo. Oh no, he said something about deflationary theory. I got stunlocked. and then I had to shake my head and clear the dust out my eyes. Oh no,
Wait, what?
because he was trying to say that like every single moral is like subjectivist judgment. Yeah, what's it called? They can be accounted for under realism because like if I say it is true that X is wrong, I just mean I don't prefer it. Like a subjectivist to say I don't mean like that means I don't prefer X. But under the inflationist theory, that would still be like something objectively true. That was what he was trying to tell me. It's basically saying that like even subjectivist statements are more realist statements technically or minimal realist.
Subjectivist? What?
Exactly.
Doesn't even make any sense. I feel like if that were the case, anti-realism just like wouldn't exist, or like at least subjectivism wouldn't exist.
Yeah, I just wonder as like if we take a deflationary theory of truth where everything like more judgments are true if they're identical to themselves. I think is that the thing that he said, and I'm trying to remember what he said. Well,
I think
about
every
this.
theory of truth except for correspondence theory is like fucking horrible.
Oh yeah, he left the VC's phone died, but